For decades now, the ThinkPad has been regarded as the greatest business laptop of all time. From retro computing enthusiasts to hardcore entrepreneurs, these sleek black rectangles have racked up quite the following, me included. Ever since my 2012 MacBook Pro kicked the bucket, repair video coming soon, I've been daily driving a Lenovo P14S 2nd generation, and I absolutely love it. I owned a modern iteration of the ThinkPad before I've ever owned an original IBM model. I've always admired them from afar, and shortly after starting this channel, I decided to take the plunge. I found this nearly perfect IBM 560Z on Facebook Marketplace, which came with an original carrying bag, a charger, extra battery, external floppy reader, IBM restored diskettes, and all of the documentations, which has already come in handy when trying to figure out how to remove the fax unit from the PC card slot. Giant fingers and all. While I was on vacation recently, I challenged myself to write a story using only the offline IBM ThinkPad, and I won't lie, even in 2023, the experience was wonderful. I'm always looking for fun ways to do distraction-free creative writing, and a retro computer that was offline was kind of the perfect solution. And while I had tons of fun with it, I still also really love writing on my modern ThinkPad. So this all had me thinking, are old ThinkPads really all that much better than new ones? Of course my P14S has a nicer charger and a slick modern design, but when put into the context of when they were released, looking at these devices as if I was standing in Circuit City or Micro Center respectively, which one would I objectively think is better? For those who don't know, the old IBM ThinkPads are widely regarded for their ease of repair and expansion, as well as their rugged durability. They were always powerful for the time to keep up with the demands of the ever-expanding office technology, yet they packed the power into a subdued, modern form factor that made them incredibly portable. Other much-loved features included their beveled keyboards, which are regarded as the best-feeling keyboards not only in mobile computing, but in general. Their unique track point is also a really popular feature, and nearly every random person that I've ever talked about a ThinkPad with has mentioned this as part of a core memory of using one back in the day. There is also their brilliant displays and 4.3 aspect ratio that seem to just work well for laptop computing. It's such a loved feature that the Framework 13 is praised for having the same proportions. Framework is a new laptop brand that hit the industry just a few years ago. While the laptops themselves seem to just be decent at all and master of none, it can't be denied that their modularity, repairability, and sustainable strategy are spiritual successors to the old school ThinkPad. Don't get me wrong, I love Framework. I was about an inch away from pulling the trigger on a new Framework 13 with the Ryzen 7 in it, but I have to wonder, why is it that the common consensus is that Framework is a spiritual successor? Surely modern Lenovo ThinkPads are the spiritual successor, if not the true successor to IBM's classic. But when talking about Lenovo's iteration on the product line, I've read criticism about the modern chiclet-style keyboard which replaced the old, beloved beveled style, as well as a change towards 16:10 displays and other modern aspect ratios, and their supposed reduced modularity and ease of repair. So I have to wonder, why the hate? Are these criticisms unfounded, or are the classics truly better after nearly 2 decades of Lenovo fumbling the product line? Or are people simply too lost in the sauce of nostalgia to accept the newer, improved models? While I can't analyze every single ThinkPad that was ever made, I can analyze my 2022 P14S in comparison to my 1998 560Z, and think about them in regards to the storied history of the IBM/Lenovo ThinkPad. So, without further delay, let's start from the beginning. It started with a thought. The famous slogan, "Think," was coined by Thomas J. Watson. It formed the basis of IBM's entire company culture. It was printed on early mainframes and led to their supplying of special notepads with the slogan printed on the front. By the way, LGR put out a great video on this subject, so I encourage you to check that out, but I'll sum it up here. While developing what would become the first true computer ThinkPad, it is said that Denny Wainbright was carrying a ThinkPad in his pocket and was inspired by it when designing the 700T, a tablet PC packing an Intel 386X20 and 8 megs of RAM. IBM wasn't a fan of the name, they prefer their numerical titles, but it leaked out to the media and they took off with it. And thus, the brand of ThinkPad was born. Released in 1992, the 700T did not sell well and disappeared off the market pretty quickly. In the wake of its failure, however, came the 700C, which would sport a 10.4-inch TFT full-color display. When compared to its contemporaries at the time, this device was a monster, clearly superior to the bulky monochrome mobile computers in the early 90s. Before the 700 series, IBM had offered the PS2 model L40SX, which was similar to the ThinkPad but wasn't quite the right mixture. It had a monochrome display and was a little bit clunkier, but ultimately it served as a pretty good stepping stone between the PC convertibles and the 700C. Needless to say, the 700C was a massive step in the right direction. They were met with critical acclaim. PC Magazine hailed it as the finest notebook on the market and wrote, quote, "After years of undistinguished portables, IBM had finally gotten it right," end quote. Common criticisms were of the high price tag, of course, and the low battery life, so the 700 series wasn't perfect, but it was probably the first example of a modern laptop that would pave the way for mobile computing for decades to come. While many people think of ThinkPads as being simple and no-nonsense, IBM actually took a lot of risks and came up with several creative takes on the classic ThinkPad recipe over the years. Some were met with critical acclaim, such as the 701C Butterfly with its expanding keyboard. To this day, we still haven't really seen a follow-up to such a thing. However, they had other ideas that didn't go over so well, such as the 550BJ, which featured a Canon bubblejet printer built into it. It was incredibly unreliable, as you can imagine. Other interesting models of the time were the 360p, which could be used with a stylus and was comparable to the Sony Vaio Z Flip or the Dell XPS 12, and there was the 755CD, which was the first to feature a CD-ROM drive, which would become a mainstay in ThinkPads until removed in 2013 by Lenovo's T440. After the 90s, the hype around the ThinkPad began to die down. IBM was still making solid devices, such as the T20, which packed a chunky Pentium 3 into a compact form factor, but nothing in these lineups stood out or broke the mold. The creative risk-taking from the 90s had ended, and so too did the interest in the IBM ThinkPad. IBM's PC business had been going downhill for years at this point, and not just the ThinkPad. IBM's business model was based on this vertical integration, basically meaning that they made everything themselves in order to have a stranglehold on the PC market. But as time wore on and tech advanced, this became less viable as brands began to make their own IBM-compatible components and eventually would cut out IBM altogether. The ThinkPad kept them afloat for a while as laptops were really expensive, but by the mid-2000s, the PC and notebook business just wasn't profitable enough for them. I like this post by the Reddit user IBM Think. I have no idea if they're actually affiliated with IBM, but this was their response to the question, why did IBM sell the brand to Lenovo? Quote, "Short answer, IBM only deals with highly profitable businesses. They don't want PCs because there isn't much profit in it." Long answer, when IBM first entered the personal computer market in the 80s, IBM defined it with the first IBM PC. The market was growing fast back then, and the prices were still high, plus IBM was a major force. In the 1990s, IBM's brand began its decline as other competitors like Compaq became stronger. On the other hand, they created the first ThinkPad, and the laptops were still high-tech in the 90s. Very expensive and very profitable. Like the IBM ThinkPad 600X, which did cost around 15,000 DM here in Germany. That changed in the early 2000s. Japanese and Taiwanese PC manufacturers were on the rise, who could produce cheaper, and laptops became a much less profitable commodity. IBM isn't interested in commodity business units, and thus sold it off to Lenovo, who, as a Chinese company, could produce for lower costs and was willing to compete in the commodity business. In the early 2000s, the PC unit was actually burning money for IBM rather than making it. Whether or not the brand was better back then is up for debate. If they couldn't sell it, I would guess that IBM would rather have closed the entire PC unit. I doubt they would have continued it, as PCs have become even less profitable since then, and more consumer-focused, which is not IBM's cup of tea." End quote. And so that was that. Lenovo now possesses all of IBM's PC division and the brand is ruined. Right? Well, no, actually Lenovo was hugely successful at resurrecting the ThinkPad as well as building their own reputation as PC manufacturers, eventually becoming the biggest PC brand in the world due to their popularity in China where they're based. In an article by PC Magazine in 2015, Tim Bajarin writes, quote, "Over the next 6 years, IBM's laptop designs took advantage of newer screens, processors, and battery chemistry, and the device morphed into the first generation of the still popular ThinkPad brand. For most of the 1990s and early 2000s, IBM had a strong PC business, and the ThinkPad was the anchor of its portable personal computer line. However, by 2004, IBM's business had changed, and it was interested in getting out of the PC hardware business. So on May 1st, 2005, IBM sold this business to Lenovo, and over the last 10 years, Lenovo has become the #1 PC player in the world." End quote. Bajarin goes on to remark upon how he was impressed with the hands-off approach that Lenovo took with the US section of their business, putting a lot of trust in Steve Ward, who is the leading voice on IBM's side of the deal. It's also worth noting that Lenovo acquired many IBM employees as a part of this deal. Bajarin also remarks, quote, "Almost all of the IBM employees moving to Lenovo were IBM lifers, and I suspected that the top talent would opt to stay at IBM instead of going with this unknown entity. Turns out that Lenovo was able to coax most of its top execs to join the new venture. These execs helped to assure IBM's corporate customers, as well as any consumers who bought its products, that it would be business as usual." End quote. When Lenovo took over IBM's PC business, it was almost as if there was no change at all, except for the fact that they now had shifted gears to focus on delivering innovative products and being willing to branch out in new areas in order to grow effectively in the PC market. This is entirely clear with the 2006 release of the T60, which brought the product line back from the brink of extinction. It was the first ThinkPad to use an Intel Core Duo and retained much of the original ThinkPad design language. This machine in particular is touted by fans as the last true ThinkPad, and has received lots of Linux support over the years. Lenovo would continue to iterate on the T60 with the compact X60 and the performance-oriented T60P, and the much more powerful Z61P. However, after 2007, there was a shift in direction. The T60/T61 turned into the T400, which was the first to do away with the 4.3 aspect ratio in favor of the widescreen 16:10. This was the first bit of controversy, and the first of several changes to come. The next big change would come with the T430 and the T430S, which would introduce the chiclet-style keyboard, which was inspired by Apple's MacBook keyboards. While still excellent, there was a sizable and vocal group that hated this shift and would be yelling about it with each new ThinkPad line that implemented the change. They're probably still yelling about it now. However, in 2013, Lenovo perhaps took a step too far and removed the dedicated mouse buttons above and below the touchpad, replacing it with a click pad that was much more awkward to use. It was universally hated, and thankfully the buttons were brought back in 2015 on the T450, although they only brought back the top buttons, and the bottom ones have yet to see a return and likely will never see a return. Interestingly enough, the X1 hit the market in 2011 as a response to the MacBook Air. The reason why this is interesting is because Lenovo's take on an Ultrabook implemented a lot of these newer design choices, and while not an immediate hit, the 2012 X1 Carbon would go on to receive great praise, and many of the subsequent releases of the X1 would go on to see a lot of success as well. Most recently, Lenovo's lineup is pretty simple, as most devices are just updated versions of the same laptops they've been developing. Although a notable deviation are the Yoga versions of certain models of ThinkPads, which feature touchscreens and can fold open into a tablet, which kind of in a way is still true to form to some of the weird ideas that IBM was throwing around in the 90s. I mean, the first ThinkPad was literally a tablet. I wouldn't blame someone who made the claim that some of the ThinkPads are really only ThinkPads in name. The Yogas, for example, are kind of just their own thing, especially given that they're likely to only have onboard RAM, removing any capability for expansion in the future. However, I still think that there are ThinkPads out there that maintain the original spirit. My P14S, for example, is a 2022 model and isn't really anything unique, but definitely follows the mentality of ThinkPads, at least in my mind. So I suppose the only reasonable thing to do is to take my old ThinkPad and my new ThinkPad, take them apart, and examine just how upgradable, serviceable, and usable that both of them are. And then from there, we will answer the question, which one is better? Or rather, determine if that even matters. We're going to see just how easy it is to upgrade the IBM 560Z. So, first thing we want to do before working on any laptop is remove the battery. And that is as easy as it gets, really. Don't get much easier than that. And we have a spare battery that came with the laptop, so that's even better. What if I want to do the hard drive, right? So if we want to take the hard drive out, we can even do this with a coin. This is called a coin screw. It's just a really big flathead. Little door comes right off. Little blue tab. And boom. Our 2.5-inch IDE drive comes out. And this is actually the original drive. So, okay, we can replace our hard drive and our battery. RAM has to be harder, right? Well, this device came out with 32 megabytes of RAM soldered onto the board, which doesn't sound great at first. However, when we undo our little door here, we got an EO DIMM, which I think we can get another 64 megabytes in there for a total of 96 megabytes of RAM, which, while probably not enough to run Haiku, is still pretty cool. That's how easy it is to upgrade this thing. Basically no thought to it. Alright, so now we're going to try to maintenance my P14S, which, should probably power off. Seems like a good thing to do, right? Man, it is hard keeping these things clean. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws on the back. And what I love, well, already, when comparing to the 1998 model, we don't have any access to anything on the back. And while they don't make it hard to get in, unlike other it's just Phillips head screws, and they are conveniently captive. They don't have any access ports for, changing out anything easily. They don't really expect you to upgrade it or do anything, But what I like is that, even though they don't expect it, you still can. We're going to start kind of prying up on these things. I don't have a good spudger. I need one. But, yeah, this can be a little testy. Oh, and we have a SIM card thing right there, so we should probably get that out. If I have something to get it out with, which I might not. See, now we're kind of, I don't have anything small enough on hand. So this is already, points away from, not even my smallest screwdriver seems to be small enough. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go get a paper clip or something. That's annoying. This is unfortunate. All I have is a staple, and I think it's just enough to work. It's I don't even know. Oh, okay. There we go. That's hackery right there. We're hackers because that's not how those come out. But what I like about the old one is the SIM card is under a cover. It's not preventing you from taking the cover off. I remember the first time I opened this thing up when I did my initial upgrades to it, that was in the way, and I didn't actually know it was there because I've never owned a business laptop before, and our spudger's just gonna break in between the cover here. Oh, yeah, it's okay. Cringe at the way I pull, how recklessly I pull off the bottom of a laptop. Yeah, I remember it took me a good 10 minutes to get this off the first time around. Granted, part of that was the damn SIM card. Okay. There we go. So we're off. And now, so what we can see here, it's kind of insane to me how similar, like if we were to pull the panel off the old one, which we will in a future video, crazy to me how similar they look. Obviously the battery takes a lot more to replace. You got screws and a little cover kind of, or a little connector taped down here. We're not going to worry about it. And I'm not going to pull out anything just because this is my daily driver and this is a demonstration. But under here we have a SODIMM slot. And I have put in a 16 gigabyte G-Skill module, and then there's 8 gigabytes soldered onto the board. So really not that much different from the older one, right? You had 32 megabytes soldered down onto the old one, and then a slot where you could put in an upgrade. That's exactly what they've done here. And we have an M.2 slot for memory. I've put in a Micro Center branded 2 terabyte SSD and a PCIe Gen 3 slot. So not the fastest, but definitely better than SATA. I have no complaints. And yeah, no, so that's how the hardest thing you're going to have to do is taking off the cover and pulling out the SIM card holder here. But other than that, it is pretty straightforward, but I have to admit that the old one's easier to work on by a landslide. As far as usability goes with these devices, they're pretty much the same. They both have track points, they both have excellent keyboards. Between the beveled and the chiclet, I mean, they're both great. I mean, the chiclet just looks more modern. It looks cheaper, but it doesn't feel cheaper, and it definitely doesn't type cheaper. It has really good response. And the same is with the beveled keyboard. It's clickier, and obviously mine's worn down a little bit more, but they're both good. They're both good for the times that they came out in, and they're both enjoyable to use today. As we saw with repairability and upgradability, the older ThinkPad obviously wins. But that is a result of the way the market has changed. The whole reason why IBM sold off their personal computer division over to Lenovo is because personal computing was becoming less luxury and boutique and becoming more consumer friendly. I like the word commodity used in some of those Reddit posts. Something to keep in mind is that from the company's perspective, it doesn't make that much sense to make a laptop totally upgradable. Technology isn't moving as fast as it was in the 90s and the 2000s. That was a time when your 32 megabyte machine that you bought in 98 might get outpaced by a 256 megabyte machine the very next year. We're just not seeing performance jumps like that anymore. That, and unfortunately, in the company's perspectives, it just makes more sense most of the time to encourage the customer to throw out their old device and buy a new one. It makes them more money. All that Lenovo has done with the ThinkPad is keeping it in line with the modern design expectations that consumers have for laptops. Yeah, it's not as upgradable, but I appreciate that they still made it possible to upgrade, unlike a lot of other manufacturers. So the question stands. Which one is better? I mean, they're both durable, reliable, and powerful machines for the time that they came out. The fact that the 560Z still works like the day it was new is a huge testament to the quality of its design and structural integrity. The P14S comes with me everywhere I go. I throw it in my car, I put it on my dirty desk at work, I take it to coffee shops. It's with me every single day. I use it every single day, and while I haven't had it long, I haven't had a single problem with it. I can't tell you how many brand new high-end Asus and MSI laptops come to me, bricked or running really slow or just not turning on after coming out of the box. And yet my $600 ThinkPad, it's a workhorse, and that's what it is, and that's what they've always been. So I don't think it's really conducive to think about which one is better. I definitely enjoy the older ones, but I don't think that the new ones are lacking something. I think if anything, they've brought a lot to the table to bring this classic computing experience to the modern day. They have a high standard of quality, And really, at the end of the day, whichever one is better is the one that you enjoy the most. The whole point of this video wasn't to pit them against each other, it was just to appreciate this amazing piece of technology that I love so much. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking to the end. I worked really hard on this one. I was going to save it for a little later, but after I saw the reception that I got in my first couple videos, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to do the ThinkPad video because I think I can do it. And I think I did it justice. Maybe I won't feel that way forever, but for right now I do, and I'm proud of myself. I hope that you guys found it helpful. I wanted to specifically call out the primary point of research that I used, which was an article called Think, A Brief History of ThinkPads from IBM to Lenovo by Sam Medley, posted on notebookcheck.net. As with all the resources I used to research this video, I will have them down in the description, but this article is very comprehensive on all the notable devices that came out and how a lot of them were received by people and things like that, and I reference this article throughout this entire video. So without it, I don't think I could have wrapped my head around this entire product line, so it is super appreciated. If you enjoyed the video or found it worthwhile, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. There'll be more stuff like this coming in the near future. And until next time, have a wonderful day.